Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to a very special episode of Watch This List. This is the first themed episode coming to you right before Halloween. And we've got horror fan Ben here, who's going to take us through his top 5 favorite creature features. Ben, what's up?
Hey.
Please tell us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you pick this out of everything, because I know you're a big fan of the genre in general, and you could have gone with a lot of different angles, actually, but you chose creature features. Why? Thrill me.
Nice. So, creature features, I feel like with the timing of this episode being near Halloween, creature features are probably just, besides slashers, probably the easiest thing anybody can get into. I mean, there's a very clear villain. It's a monster. I mean, it's not going to be anything super esoteric or that you have to really wrap your mind around, you know. So creature features, to me, they're just more easygoing, relaxed style horror films.
Yeah, because you originally had suggested cosmic horror, which would have been like 2001: A Space Odyssey and things of that ilk.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's probably my favorite type of horror, because, I don't know, there's something really terrifying about the unknown. And also those movies deal with things that our human minds can't even comprehend. So,
True.
I don't know. I feel like I wanted to keep this a little bit more fun and easygoing.
Little light.
Light, yeah, not get into those little weeds of, you know, what terrifies you on the inside.
And creature features is very catchy. It's my first rhyming episode title, so that goes to you. So what made you pick these particular 5 for creature features?
So most of them I have seen countless times over the years, and they have some sort of impact on me as far as scare level when I watch them, their practical effects, or just a favorite director of mine. All of them are actually pretty different in tone, despite all being based around a creature of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These are all just ones that I find highly rewatchable. They're both fun. I guess we'll get some in when people watch them, and if you agree, some of them maybe not be as fun as the other ones, but they're fun, and they have some substance to them. So I try to pick at least some stuff that, you know, I could easily choose some real dumb, trashy creature features from the 80s they're more in the so bad they're good territory. But I want to stick with ones that they do have some merit to them. You know, they got some substance.
I had only seen his 5th one and his first one. And the 5th one, I actually saw wrong. I actually saw the American ending for. I ended up having to get the Blu-ray just to watch it too, which is a whole other thing that we're going to discuss. But there are a bunch of different cuts for things with horror movies, because Ben informed me that, that the censors in the past were very squeamish about violence, and so there's like all these different versions of things. Like Dawn of the Dead has 3 different versions too.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. That's been the good thing about some of these movies getting rediscovered and, you know, released on Blu-ray by some of these specialty companies, is that part of the attraction is they have these, sometimes they're like long lost edits, or just it's a comprehensive release where they have all the different edits all on one disc or a couple discs, so you can choose which one you want to watch.
But then if you're not like a big horror fan, you have no idea. Like I had to consult 3 different people.
Yeah, I even run into that so I purchased a lot of Scream Factory releases, and they have sometimes up to like 2 or 3 edits. So I don't know. Usually if there's a director's cut, I'll watch that, but I don't know. I usually try to stick with at least the theatrical
for the first viewing.
Yeah. Just the way anyone would have seen it when it first came out, just to get the first initial impression.
All right, so we're gonna dive right in. We're gonna start with number 5, which is The Descent, 2005, directed by Neil Marshall. It is in a cave, and it's got an all-female cast, which makes it super unique and very gripping. There's 2 different versions, the American and the British. Ben, tell us what you recommend. Tell us why you like this movie so much.
So yeah, we'll start with, make sure you watch the original British version. It's a real slight, it's maybe like a 30-second, maybe to 1 minute difference between the ending, but it makes a huge difference. You wouldn't think it does. It's literally like, I don't know why they must have thought Americans were too dumb and needed this terrible ending.
Placating baloney.
Yeah. But no, this movie is fantastic. For like what you said, the all-female cast at the time was very unique. So I feel like the movie itself was way ahead of the curve when it first came out. Mm-hmm. Not only in that regard, but also with this whole movement of grief-stricken, protagonist theme that is so prevalent in horror these days. I'm trying to think of a movie before this that was just the entire theme. And this was like right smack dab middle 2000s, and we started getting to that, I hate the term when people say elevated horror, but that whole more artistic horror that started maybe in around, early 2010s to
like
now.
You're talking about like Hereditary or like, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
like
things that, people associate A24 with a lot of their more highbrow horror, things like that. So those type of films that have come out that really focus on maybe the themes more so than the outright horror. I mean, they do have a lot of horrific things in them, but I feel like The Descent was way ahead of the curve as far as having that be their central theme. But then on top of it, you have these fantastic creatures that, I can't even describe how amazing. They're like a mix of Nosferatu with
Gollum.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I was trying to think what is it mixed with, but Nosferatu meets Gollum. Oh, it's just so good, and the fact that the movie works on multiple levels. It's not only just a horror movie, but as like a cave adventure thriller. People stuck because before we even get into the actual horror aspects, there's the whole aspect of them being stuck in a cave. So it's kind of like this thriller before we even get to the terrifying moments. And then on top of that, it's a huge drama too. It's like a personal drama.
Yeah, and it's very claustrophobic. A lot of people commented and were like, the tight spaces is what, like, and when you're watching it, you're kind of like...
Yeah. Still, I've seen it so many times, and it still has that effect on me. It's terrifying. I don't get too scared from many things in movies, but when they focus on real life things of being like enclosed in a tight space as effectively as it does in this movie, oh man, it's still, even sitting in an open room like this, I just feel like the walls are closing in on me.
It's got that kind of energy to it before even the creatures show up. It's already scary.
Yep.
Just because the feeling of being trapped or not knowing your way out is scary enough.
Right. And the characters themselves are kind of slowly unraveling. So you're kind of getting them, in a way, they're coming unhinged a little bit. But another thing that I really like about this movie is that the characters themselves stay pretty smart. There's no real dumb, I mean, there's one character that's this kind of novice. This is her first time in I don't know, it's not necessarily her first time in a cave, but she's trying to impress. So she's kind of doing things that are a little more reckless. But everyone else, everything that they do is just super smart, which is always refreshing in a horror movie.
I agree. I think competence.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I liked about, not to get too off, but I liked that about Barbarian as well, with the lead, where when people don't make just idiotic mistakes or they act in a way that you feel you would, that's when it's the best.
Right. And if they're going to do something that puts them in a terrifying situation, they're thinking it out like beforehand of how can I approach this so I can actually investigate what's going on without just being like the dumb character that just blindly walks into a terrible situation. They kind of examine it first before they do anything.
Right. And this movie kind of like, there's like the traumatic event that happens right away, and then
and it's shocking
kind
too.
of jumps.
It's like a
yeah. Well, and it's done in such a abrupt, like arresting sort of way too.
In a way, like something like that would happen in real life. You're just in a moment's notice, like her life changes and
blindsided.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in with her all the way, and it doesn't feel incredibly contrived or silly, like some horror movies do, where it just feels kind of gimmicky or like it's like a device that they're just using. And then it feels like all the horror elements are just kind of like unburying her internal struggle, and the subconscious is coming out.
Right. And that's why it also works on like a psychological horror thriller level too, is because while there are creatures in it, you could look at it one way as the creatures being manifestations of her own trauma in a way.
And grief.
Yeah.
I like horror in a sense because it allows people to like deal with really hard things in a very dramatic fashion. Whereas like in life, if somebody passes away, you're just like expected to be normal and like function normally. Whereas the way that you feel is like very out of control and very dramatic. In our culture, we're not really supposed to just be you're not just supposed to be showing up to work crying every day. You've got to have a sense of composure, but horror allows it to be like, no, like this would feel this way.
And that's what I like about the lead character too, is, she starts off as this grief-stricken person that's gone through this traumatic experience, and she's kind of totally out of control based off of that. And then as the movie goes on, she just transforms into this person that takes charge of the situation and becomes this, I don't know, she looks as this, she confronts her grief head on in a way and just takes control of it, which is also a really good, character development moment.
Oh, for sure. How do you rate this in terms of like jump scares and in terms of like technical, technical quality as far as the graphics concerned, because you're somebody who watches these types of things often.
Yeah, that's one thing that stands out. I mean, on a technical level, the way he films the darkness and shadows. I mean, even before we get to the monsters, there's stuff in the background that's playing tricks on your eyes, things like that. The practical effects are amazing with the creature design. I think as far as scares work, I think there's two of the best scares I've ever seen in any movies. It's so good.
Yeah, and even when you're expecting it.
Yeah.
I think this is, I would say, out of all, well, besides number one that Ben has, this is the one that's the most popular. But if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Try it. Everything that was streaming was the American version, which is like, they're like a minute difference. So it was actually kind of difficult for me to figure out that everything, but it is streaming on Amazon Prime. It's just the American ending there. So if you can get your hands on the unrated cut, that's what you want.
Right.
Because the ending does make a lot of difference.
I mean, you could always, it wouldn't be ideal because you're going between two, but it is on YouTube. So if you don't want to buy the Blu-ray, you could always watch the American version, because between the two versions, it's just basically they cut a scene at the end for the American version. So you're really not, I don't know, if you watch it pretty close together, you'll kind of get the impact if you're unable to buy the Blu-ray. You'll still be able to get that impact if you watch the movie on streaming and then go to YouTube and watch the British ending.
Those of you who are listening to this and listen to this show, I expect that you get the British version, okay?
Me too.
Don't YouTube this. Go all out. It's worth it. I liked it. And, yeah. You go big or go home. But Ben's giving you some options just in case.
I'm a big advocate for physical media. So I will always say buy it if you can. But, if you're not able to, there's that option too.
And you could also always read about it.
True.
Okay, so that's number 5, The Descent. Okay, number 4, we got, actually, you say this title, Ben. What's your number 4?
Number 4 is Pumpkinhead, 1988. Do you want to finish the director?
Directed by Stan Winston, who is a legend
Yep.
in his own right, for being a creature feature, like special effects, practical effects designer, right?
Yep, just
He's
all the above. Yeah, he's just one of the most
renowned.
renowned effects guys in the industry.
They based this movie off of a poem called Pumpkinhead by a guy named Ed Justin, which I posted because I was like, I have to post a poem now. I had to read it. It's pretty short. And then this is starring Lance Henriksen, who I had never seen anything by him or with him in it before. So that was a really nice eye opener for me because I know he's in a bunch of horror stuff, right?
Yeah, he's in a lot. He's just in a lot of movies in general. Once you start going down the rabbit hole of Lance Henriksen, you'll see how many movies he's been in. It's insane. I mean, he's been in a couple, bigger A-list movies, I guess. Not a ton, but his kind of bread and butter was always in those lower budget.
Can be.
Yeah, or just lower budget movies, like maybe more indie movies in general that didn't get the big Hollywood budgets.
Yeah, so tell us, just tell us without spoiling anything. Tell us a little bit about Pumpkinhead, and then what about this makes it stand out to you? Like, how did you even see this movie? Because I think this is one that not a lot of people have heard of.
Right. So I guess to give the gist of it, it's a rural folktale, is the best way to put it. Shrouded in a bunch of fog. The theme, I guess I would say, is when vengeance consumes you, this is what happens. So to give the gist of the movie, it's a son and his dad. They just kind of live out in the middle of nowhere. They have a small little grocery store, really simple life, and then a bunch of dumb college kids come through, I think, to some sort of like motocross. I don't know what they're doing, some competition. And I don't know, one of the characters is a big jerk.
Joel.
And he decides Joel. He decides to start, using his motocross bike or whatever. And the dad leaves the kid alone and to set it up.
Something terrible
happens. And enter in this rural kind of folk creature named Pumpkinhead that if you summon Pumpkinhead, it will go after the people that you want it to go after. So that's kind of the basic gist of the movie, is this dad summoning Pumpkinhead, and then we see what happens. And it's amazing.
And it's not like a big budget film, like you can tell, but like the Pumpkinhead himself is pretty gnarly.
And yeah, that's I mean, that has to be in part due to Stan Winston. I mean, he was never going to direct a movie where a creature is one of the central parts of it and not have it look amazing. I mean, I would say besides the number one choice I have on this is the best, like, practical effects makeup monster. And just for him being such a legend in this industry and with effects, he knew exactly how to film Pumpkinhead. And it just looks so amazing and terrifying, and the way they keep it mostly in shadows for the most part.
It reminded me actually a lot of Alien in that way.
Yep. Oh yeah. Even the design is very...
Exactly. It's very similar to the way the alien walks and kind of the head shape and the shadows, like you're saying.
Like the legs look really similar. Even those, I don't know how to describe it, but those super elongated, creepy legs that are just kind of hunched over a little bit.
Yeah, and he's called Pumpkinhead basically because he's coming out of a pumpkin patch. It's not necessarily like it wouldn't be what you would immediately think if you hear the word.
Right. Yeah, it's not like a literal monster that just has a pumpkin head. That would be a little cheesy. Honestly, it ended up being a totally different movie if that were the case. But
which is what I thought it was. I was expecting a monster with a pumpkin head, and then I was like, no, he's just from a pumpkin patch.
Right.
Let's not go crazy with this thing.
Yeah, and I guess the best part about this is on paper, it seems, even as you're watching it, it seems like, okay, this is just going to kind of go into slasher territory. But there is huge heart at the middle of this movie, especially with Lance Henriksen. I mean, his character is like the driving force of what pushes this whole movie along and what lengths he goes to. So once there's actual killings that start, they're not just these mindless killings. They come out of like a place of anger, and where nobody's really the winner, is you get the sense throughout this movie.
It actually reminded me of the movie Ransom with Mel Gibson.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, really? Mm-mm. Okay, Ransom's terrific, but that's where Mel Gibson's son gets kidnapped, and it's like a cat and mouse thing with him and the guy that does it, but it's kind of that, like, there's a drama vibe. I told Ben, like, I was literally sobbing and just crying in the first 30 minutes, and I was like, I'm crying on a movie called Pumpkinhead. What has led me to this moment in life?
That's what's great. The title is really, it gets you. It lures you into being, you're like, all right, this is going to be some cheesy 80s movie. It's going to be stupid, but no, you're like, oh, wow, holy shit. There's some substance here.
Yeah, and then you got the dumb teenagers, and like, I loved how their names were just like so basic.
Yep.
Like, it was like Joel, Chris, and Steve. And they're like, don't go out there, Steve. You know, we got to save my brother, Chris. So there's that kind of vibe to it that's really fun.
And I like that there's two totally different feels to the movie. There's this like dusty, grimy half when it's daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the nighttime, and all of a sudden, like, the atmosphere just changes. And it's honestly, when autumn starts rolling in, you get that little breeze in the air. Every time the temperature starts changing, I think of Pumpkinhead. I want to watch it every year because the atmosphere in this movie is like palpable. You can just reach out and touch it. Especially when they go to the little pumpkin patch to get Pumpkinhead. That whole feeling is just insane.
I think Pumpkinhead is also unique in the way that it plays with those kind of tropes, like the cabin in the woods trope, the dumb teenagers angle too. Is very interesting in this movie. Mm-hmm. And but I mean, I think the main draw is the Stan Winston practical effect part of it.
Yeah, and I just like the inevitability of Pumpkinhead. They really hype him up to be this, like, once he's here, he's not going away, and that's really the case. And I think that ties in perfectly with that whole theme of vengeance, of like, once you set down this path and you're dead set on it, there's no going back. And that it reflects.
When you also can't reason with it either, because it's like a demon. Yeah, you know,
its whole purpose is being summoned for vengeance. So it's like you're not going to be able to talk it out of, or like trick it into doing anything. Like a lot of horror movies, you can trick the villain and maybe get an upper hand. It's like, no, you're not going to do anything to Pumpkinhead. No. It's going to kill you.
Yeah. So Pumpkinhead, check it out. Amazon rental is where I saw that one. I don't know if it's on like Shudder or anything for the...
That's one of those weird ones where I feel like every once in a while it might pop up, but it's never seems to be a mainstay on any streaming platform. So yeah, it's most likely going to be a rental.
Okay. We're at number 3, which is a fun one. This is Night of the Creeps from 1986, directed by Fred Decker. And this one is definitely a completely different route as far as tone. It's like a spoof of sorts, but also an homage, because Fred Decker was like a big horror fan, right? Yep. So yeah, tell us what you love about this one.
For exactly what you just said, it's just more on the goofy approach. But again, as you watch it, there's a lot of heart to it. So there's this. It never takes itself too seriously, but it also never goes too far into like campy territory, even though there are some real campy elements. I just think there's at the time at least, it was a perfect modern take on one of those 50s sci-fi B horror movies. And there's the whole movie is these two kids that are freshmen in college. And so the whole movie, first of all, takes place like on a college campus, which is always just kind of a fun vibe in movies. especially when you get to that 80s era of college movies. I don't know. There's just something about them that just makes you wish you could have been there. So there's kind of like this whole coming of age college element, and then you get thrown into all. The best way to put it is parasitic slugs that take over your mind. So if you're into that stuff, I mean, you're in for a treat.
This will work for you on multiple levels.
Yeah, and it's just such a genuinely funny, heartfelt, and easygoing movie. I think easygoing is the best way of putting it. You can just put this on. It's such like a lazy Sunday, easy watch, easily digestible.
Well, and it starts out in black and white, so it feels, it starts out in like the 50s. Yep. So there's like this sense of like a throwback to like older films, and then there's like, once it shifts, it's like you can clearly see like the guy was influenced by Invasion of the Body Snatchers and zombie movies. Like there's a lot of different things that are being borrowed, I feel like. And we've also got that like fun fraternity energy with the morons like we had in Pumpkinhead. That's really fun.
Yeah. But it's not just like a throwback for throwback's sake, because even though it is influenced by 50s horror movies, sci-fi, it actually, the opening ties in through the rest of the movie, even with Tom Atkins' character, which we should definitely talk about Tom Atkins now, because not only is he, I love him. He's the best part of this movie. Even if I didn't love him, like bias aside, he is the best part of this movie. He's got like these amazing quips, and he's got a good backstory, and I don't know, he's like, his character is like really sad. Like some of the things he does, like they insinuate that he's, suicidal at moments. It's just
he is so, I had never seen him in anything before, and so I wasn't familiar with the actor. But like at the very beginning, anytime somebody calls him on the phone or he shows up, he's like, "Thrill me."
Yep. It's such a great line. I mean, I love it.
It's great how he says it, and then he's just like he's so disillusioned and just like
he's so over,
like,
just
over it. Yeah.
Which that's what's smart too about his character, because it could easily be he's just like that typical detective. He's just, I'm too old for this shit kind of guy. But really, as the story goes on, you see he has his backstory, like the serious side of it too, of why he's kind of disillusioned and he's kind of depressed, and he's just kind of over life in general, not just his job. He's just like, everything is just a bother to me at this point. So when he actually decides to help the main characters, I don't know, it's a great turn.
Yeah, and the main characters are Chris Romero and J.C. Hooper, right?
I think that's his last. I can't remember it, but JC for sure.
I know. I'm pretty sure that Hooper is the last name. So you guys better know what that's in reference to. I'm not even gonna tell you.
Right. You can tell he had a lot of fun making it, and it seemed, just from the way everyone acts in it and the whole feel, it seems like even probably on set was really fun and just a good time.
Yeah, and there's kind of a camaraderie feel about it too. That's really nice.
Yeah.
But the two main guys are Chris and JC, who are BFFs.
Right. And I know before we briefly talked about it, but there is a really great scene between the two of them that you really like, and I do too. And I think it's just such a great, sincere moment of character development too. It just briefly breaks up this kind of lackadaisical, funny tone of the movie, and kind of gets real serious, but also acts as like a catalyst for what these characters do within the next 20-30 minutes. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of like Superbad and Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen, sort of, where two guys are able to be kind of emotional and vulnerable with each other without it being weird, and it feels very, very sincere.
It's so like, the characters are great. That's always what makes a good horror movie to me too, is you have to have the good characters. Sometimes there's a time and a place for fun movies where it's just like the characters are just one-dimensional and they're only there to be killed off. Those have their merits, but for the most part, I enjoy going into a movie that has a well thought out story along with well thought out characters that you actually want to root for. You're not rooting for them to die. You actually want them to survive the end of the movie.
Well, and what is your opinion, since this is a creature feature emphasis, what is your opinion on the graphics for this one as far as the gore and the goopy stuff?
I think the practical effects are amazing in this movie. Like, when it gets to the real full-blown action at the end, I'll just tell people there's a lot of, like, not in a gross way. I don't know, maybe some people will be grossed out by it, but there's a lot of amazing, like, exploding head scenes, because the way these slugs leave is basically they infest you, and then your head explodes, and that shoots more of them out to go infect other people. And it's just glorious. And it's just a long lost art that we don't have these days, because everything's so much cheaper just to throw money at digital effects. You know, they don't want to spend the money on having a team of people working in some sort of lab of some sorts, creating these gross creatures and practical effects with, you know, rubber and latex and all this stuff. So I don't know. I always think it shoots better on film. It just looks better.
Feels more real somehow, even though what you're seeing is completely imagined and doesn't exist.
But in a way, but it
feel-
is real technically, because it's not these like computer generated images. You know, it's not these
Right.
fake. Somebody actually
Right.
crafted this. You know, it's not like a real head exploding, but it looks real. I mean, they crafted it, put it all together. I don't know, made with someone's hands. I don't know. It's a fantastic practical effect movie on top of everything else.
And it being kind of, I think I would use the word, for Night of the Creeps, I would use the word wholesome.
Yeah.
To describe just the tone of it. And then it's got some humor to it, a lot of humor. I think Tom Atkins kind of elevates
Yeah.
like, one critic said that Henriksen brought a welcome gravitas to Pumpkinhead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Tom does the same thing in Night of the Creeps. So Night of the Creeps, I watched this on Amazon. Ben said that there's a couple of different endings, but this one apparently has the correct one. So you'll be fine if you watch just the straight up version that you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
Should be.
Either ending will be fine. I mean, either one kind of fits with the tone. It's a goofy movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. So
yeah, that's Fred Decker, 86. Okay, so now we're getting into the nitty gritty here with Ben's top two. Number 2 is Dog Soldiers, directed by our returning friend Neil Marshall, who did this prior to The Descent, right?
Yeah, this was his first movie.
Oh, this was his first movie ever.
Yeah.
And it's also British, but like takes place in Scotland mostly.
Yep.
Or fully, from 2002. So tell us a little bit about this, and tell me what is it you like about this movie? Because what do you think is outstanding about it?
Well, first, I will pitch it as Evil Dead meets Night of the Living Dead meets Assault on Precinct 13 with werewolves. So if any of that interests you,
dissect this for us, please, Ben.
Well, so I guess the general idea, it's a military excursion. So these guys they don't have any live ammo. It's like a training exercise. They're out in the middle of the woods, and they come across another team that was massacred by something, like just ripped apart, except their leader is still alive. So they quickly find out that it was actually a group of werewolves out in these woods. They retreat to a cabin in the woods, and they finally got some live ammunition now from this other team. So now it's kind of this trapped inside this house, trying to survive the night against these werewolves that are hunting them. So, I mean, there is like this Evil Dead aspect of cabin in the woods type thing. It's just totally different style. But then, you know, Night of the Living Dead, they're getting attacked by these creatures trying to get inside. And even Assault on Precinct 13, which is that similar thing, which is more of the action-oriented aspect of this story, where It's kind of this high octane action film. That's what I like about it is apart from these other ones, these that are kind of story driven or have more comedic elements, which there is actually some funny comedic elements to this amongst the characters, because there is this, great camaraderie between these guys. They actually feel like they're a group of guys that have known each other and have been through a lot of shit together. So when they actually go from this training exercise where it's like, oh, I'm like, the funny part about it is that one of the characters is just mad that he doesn't get to watch the soccer match between England and Germany. Like, that's all he wants to do is to get back home to watch that. But yeah, it's this high octane action against this seemingly unstoppable foe. So you have these kind of, I can see where some people might not like because it's like overly macho in ways, with this testosterone filled macho guys just firing machine guns. But I don't know, something about that and just this pure action is super fun.
And the werewolves are like huge.
Yeah, I would say out of any werewolf movie, and they're my favorite creatures in any horror movies, so that's probably why this also is super high up on my list. I love werewolf movies and there's so many ones that aren't done well, so being a fan of werewolf movies is tough because for every one good one you watch, there's a lot of snoozers. But this one, I don't know, I hadn't seen any, maybe similar, most similar would be werewolves from The Howling from the 80s. They're similar to that, but even more just ruthless and vicious. They just seem like they're out there to protect their territory and kill you.
And these are like, they're gigantic, and then they're quick. I mean, they're like,
right. I guess the editing is what gives it that illusion, which I can see some people may not be a fan of the editing style because it's like that real frenetic, fast cuts, which a lot of the times can be a cheap way to craft tension when it's not actually there, but I think it only heightens the tension.
Ben knows that I gave this movie rather low. He doesn't know why because I didn't review it. So Ben is fishing for what exactly
I know. I've been looking forward to this the most. I'm like, I want to hear why this is so hated.
He's like, maybe there could be these reasons that that one may not appreciate such a film, perhaps.
But I do recognize that this movie, though, compared to the other ones, I don't know. It does seem like it's a certain audience that likes it. I guess everything that I like about this movie is the camaraderie and the action. I mean, I am a big action film fan on top of things. So when you can combine horror and action, I don't know. I think he does it really well.
Yeah, I think what happened was for me was it was very dude energy, which is interesting because one of my favorite things about The Descent, which he also did, was the opposite. Like, I loved the female energy that it had. And so I was like, oh, this is literally the direct opposite. Like, if you want to see like a testosterone driven heavy thing with artillery and like lots of explosions and just like that manic energy, then it's this. And then the director's next one was The Descent. So very interesting. And then Dog Soldiers also, it lost me a little bit when it got a little bit dramatic with the guts. Like that whole
putting up.
There's like a scene. Yeah, there's a scene where somebody is injured, but the overreaction, I don't even know if it's overreaction. It's just like it became a little bit unbelievable. And then the movie goes so off the rails that I found it hard to be afraid because I felt like it was so unlikely. I was thinking about like how realistic it was, and that distracted me. Does that make sense?
Realistic as in his guts coming out of his body? And they're like, and they literally tell him, well, they came out, we can put them back in. Which is it's a funny line. I mean, it's that guy's way of telling him, like, listen, you're going to be okay. They were in there before, they're out now, we can put them back in.
It's a little bit more far-fetched. My suspension of disbelief was really tested with this film. Let's put it that way. And so I felt like It was asking too much of me, Ben.
Right. You do see a lot of werewolves at night. No, I totally understand that. It's I actually, what I've seen some people compare this to, which I want to see a reaction on this, is a lot of people compare it to the energy of aliens.
Oh.
So maybe there's something there to that.
Maybe you should have led with that first, and then I would understand.
It's like an action movie first, a horror movie second.
Well, now I know that werewolves are your favorite thing. That makes a lot more sense as to why this would be appealing to you. Because at first I was like, this doesn't have a lot of. Because keep in mind too, when I'm watching these in a row. Like, I want everybody to watch everybody's list, but more than that, it's like if one of these sounds interesting to you, watch them.
Yeah.
But I'm watching all 5 of them each time, and so I'm getting a sense of who the person is. But when I got to Dog Soldiers, it was so different emotionally from The Descent, Pumpkinhead, and Night of the Creeps. So it was like, what has been where it's just felt so out of left field comparatively.
So also an aspect of this is nostalgia too. I saw this movie when I was really young. I believe this may have been at the time, at least in the US, it was like a Sci-Fi Channel debuted movie, even though it wasn't produced by them. I can't remember the whole deal. So I just remember as a young kid watching this movie and just being so blown away by all the action. But also, even back then, I always loved practical effects, which, as we're seeing, that's a reoccurring theme in all my choices here. There's none of these movies have CGI monsters. There's nothing in these movies that have anything computer generated. It's all great practical effects and creature design by actual people, with latex and whatnot. And I when I remember being a kid seeing the werewolves when they first show them, even now they still look super impressive the way they film them. They look super terrifying when at the very end when you see them like fully stand up and confront them. It's a great shot and image.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like watching a video game in a way also.
It does have that energy too. It's got the real action video game energy, which again, if you're not into that, I can totally understand why this movie would have aspects that are turn off. But to me, I feel like the pros outweigh any of the cons.
Right. It was an interesting placement in the grand scheme of things as well, because I would have thought that you would put The Descent before this one, because these are the only two with the same director. But the werewolves aspect of it makes sense, and then also that it just has that resonance with you still.
Yeah, there's a big nostalgia factor.
Yeah, this is one that I think that way more people would like than dislike.
Yeah, and if you go based off of the Letterboxd reviews, or not necessarily the reviews, the what people are rating it, I think it has like an average of a 3.4. So it seems like a lot of people dig it for the most part. So I feel like there's enough there for people to at least enjoy it.
Yes. Don't listen to any of my qualms. Just because I was like, what the heck, Ben, does not mean that you will be too. And the movie's called Dog Soldiers, for goodness sake. I mean, that's also just like it's like, what the heck is this movie going to be about? And when it starts, you don't really know, although it kind of throws you in like right away with the people in the tent, where you're like, well, you should never be camping in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Starts off with a bang.
Moron.
Starts off with a bang.
Yeah.
I mean, literally.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. And it's high octane.
Right. Yeah. And I do want to say, though, as we get in closer to my number one pick, 5 through 2 could have all been in random order, because number 1 is going to be number 1 above everything. So don't take too much stock into, Dog Soldiers being number 2, because number 1 is just going to be a banger.
All right, Ben. With that kind of segue, you're going to have to say it yourself.
Okay.
So, and this is Ben's favorite movie. Period. So this could also be a good reason why you pick Creature Features, just so that you could talk about this. Although I think you would have brought it into any conversation inadvertently.
Right. I feel like if we were going to do a horror themed episode, I would have been able to sneak in this movie, or at least a movie by this director, somewhere in there. It's on your
It's on your
it's on
shirt,
my
for
shirt
goodness
right
sake.
here. So
Okay, go for it.
it is The Thing, 1982, directed by John Carpenter.
Directed by
And
John Carpenter.
there's so much you can say about it, but I understand this being the number one. So many people have seen it at this point. It's not like this is like some underseen gem. People know that it's amazing at this point. But as far as creature features go, I don't think anything can top it. It is unrivaled both in execution and, again, as we've talked many, many times, in practical effects. I mean, the stuff that you see in this movie, still to this day, I don't know how they did half the things. And I can't even imagine being like on set. I feel like it'd be so easy to react to seeing those the way they do in this movie, being like, what are we seeing right now?
What is going on? What is this thing?
Yep, exactly.
And there's so many different versions of the thing.
And,
like, it isn't just one thing.
Right. And I guess if people somehow don't know about this movie, which no judgment if you haven't, because I'm excited if you are going to be watching this for the first time. It's a movie about crew in Antarctica. They are
led by Kurt
Russell. They're super isolated, obviously, given the territory. They're researching. We don't ever know what they're researching out there. But it starts off with a helicopter chasing a dog near their area, and they're trying to kill this dog. They're throwing grenades at it. It's like way over the top. It's like, what? It's a dog. Are you throwing explosives at it? I don't know. They eventually land, and they kill the people that are trying to kill the dog, and now they have this dog in their possession. And from then on,
things get weird.
That's the best way to put it. I mean, it's right there. It's right there in the title. There's a thing, and it's going to get weird.
And it actually, the setup, I watched this last night, and the setup reminded me a lot of Alien, where you've got a crew, they're isolated, you know, it's a little bit claustrophobic, where you feel like they're like way removed. Like, so if something happens to them, the chances of getting out of it or getting help or anything of that nature is like, it's a long shot. And then something happens or appears, and then it's like, what are we going to do? You know? But the special thing about The Thing is the paranoia element, I would say, that stood out to me the most plot-wise, where it's like, if you start to mistrust your own crew.
Yeah, these guys that you have been with for how long? However long I can't remember if they established it in the movie, but they know each other. I mean, they live with these guys day in and day out. I mean, they're stuck with them, so they know who they're dealing with, and as soon as that trust starts to go, I mean, that just kickstarts the whole movie.
Yeah, and Kurt Russell as McCready kind of plays like a reluctant hero, which is an interesting figure, because he's not, I wouldn't call him an anti-hero. He's like a reluctant hero. Like he just wants to drink and like mind his own business and like play chess, you know?
Yeah, he's just the helicopter pilot. I mean, he's not a researcher. He's not there for anything other than, I guess, transporting them to and from when they need to go. And he's just their transport. So he doesn't really have like a stake in the research aspect. So maybe he's already just kind of jaded about his situation. Like, I'm stuck out in the cold. I'm just the pilot. But I do want to mention that chess scene at the beginning is so great because it sets the tone, like from the get-go, not only with his character, just how he deals with situations, but just the fact that no matter who's the winner, whether like, so I guess to set the scene, he's playing a chess on like a computer, basically. It's not like an actual physical chess game. It's against a computer, and the computer wins. And he calls the computer a bitch, basically, or something to that effect, and he pours his alcoholic drink on it and just completely destroys the computer because he lost. And that right there just sets the tone for both his character and the fact that what we're about to see is going to be, there's a no-win situation. Like, whoever wins, it doesn't win. I just love it. It sets the tone perfectly. Carpenter's direction, I think, is really, really masterful, is how he controls like the narrative and the story. crafting the tension, how the characters interact with one another, just creating the general atmosphere. Like no scene is wasted. Like I can't think of one scene in that movie where like that could be cut. And that's like no, everything serves a purpose.
And then you have the practical effects really, there's no other besides Cronenberg. I can't think of even a remote comparison to how intricate and gooey and disgusting and gross this thing is. And it's like multiple different shapes and sizes, and so it's like there's so many scenes where you see different iterations of the creature,
Right.
or thing, whatever it is. You see different.
Yeah, you never know its actual true form because the way it's implied is that this
Yeah.
thing has been on other planets, supposedly. So wherever it's been, it even has a part of whatever was on that planet within it. So you have like all these different elements. So that's why it's so terrifying too. And that's why the effects are so amazing, because Rob Bottin, the practical effects head guy for that movie, was given free reign they're like, there's no direction with this. Go do whatever you want. So that's why everything that makes even the effects more impressive, because each scene, like you said, is nothing looks the same in every scene. So that the amount of work just to create a different completed effect like that with multiple moving parts is super impressive.
Yeah, and it's disturbing because you're trying to kind of take in, you're trying to recognize what it is based on how it's morphing, like the shape-shifting aspect of
Yeah.
the creature. Or I wouldn't even say creature, it's like a parasite. But you're trying to recognize the elements of it that look like something else.
Mhm.
And so they do a really good job where it's like, well, there's elements of a human in it, but then there's this imitation adaptation side to it too. And it's just all scary because it sounds, they're trying to make sense of it, but when you see it,
There's no way to make sense. You're just like, okay, now spider legs are crawling out of it. There's a dog in this part of it. There's tentacles. It's like, what is it? What even is this thing? Like,
and then it's like spewing out things,
yeah.
like
Mhm.
fluids. And yeah, it's pretty if I saw this young, like as a kid, I would be terrified.
I do remember this being one of the earliest movies I saw as far as horror movies. This and Day of the Dead, Romero, and both of those movies have such incredible practical effects. So like, not only did that kickstart my love of horror movies, but also just appreciating like the movie magic of creating these things that you can physically see and like you feel like you could reach out and touch it.
Mm-hmm. Not that you'd want to.
No, I would never want to be close to the thing.
As far as the production quality, cinematography, the music is by Morricone. So the score is kind of, I was thinking when I watching it that the score is not necessarily memorable as far as it, whether it's catchy or not. You kind of don't notice it, except it's just like duh. I mean, like it has, it sets up the atmosphere very well without sounding familiar.
Yeah, well, and it's Morricone doing his own impression of a Carpenter score too, which I thought was interesting because you know
Okay.
Morricone's name and you like think of these sweeping, beautiful scores. Yeah,
Sergio
yeah,
Leone.
which
Hmm.
he does have that. Like, there's a scene where Morricone shines really, really bright. Is when there's a scene where they go to the Norwegian camp and they see that block of ice. And as they like are walking into, you hear the sweeping score, and it's really terrifying. And I can just tell that was all Morricone without John Carpenter,
Tinkering.
being there for tinkering or anything like that.
And Ben, just since I think you were one of the first people, if not the first person that I have interviewed so far, who their favorite movie of all time is on the list. So, like, why is this your favorite of all time? Not just like your favorite horror movie, but what is it that is so, even after all this time of seeing it, It's still like your number one.
Yeah. It all comes down to how well it's put together. I mean, the script is super solid. The direction is amazing. Like I said before, there is really no wasted scene. I'd be surprised if anyone could come back like after this and be like, actually, this scene could be cut. I think anybody
You're
that watches
wrong.
this, yeah. And then the score is amazing, as we talked about. I just really think it's generally terrifying, which is something that a lot of movies don't get right. And I think that comes from Carpenter. He's just, at this point, he was such a master at what he did. He knew exactly how to make scenes work. He knew exactly when to like let other people take over and do what they do best to help. And then the acting is super good. Like Kurt Russell is, I remember him not even being, from what I read, is he wasn't even first choice, which is just hard to think about because he works so perfectly. He has like that great leading man energy and face, but he still fits in with that rugged look. He's got that
The hair.
I mean, that hair and then that dumb hat, but it's actually kind of cool. Like I would totally, I could never wear that hat, but that I don't even know how you describe that hat that he's wearing. It's like
a cowboy hat that's
but like oversized. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's like flat in the front. It just looks really weird.
You will be on Ben's instant friend list if you like this movie, but especially for those of you who haven't seen it, if there are such people, definitely check it out and watch it on the biggest TV in the best version that you can. Now we are at my favorite part of this segment, which is inspired by James Lipton's Inside the Actor Studio questionnaire. I have taken 5 questions per episode. I do not know Ben's answers ahead of time, so your reaction is my reaction, folks. Number 1, jumping right in, Ben, what is the most underrated movie?
Initially, I was going to go for Halloween 3, Behind Me. But I feel like it's over the years, it's kind of come around where more people have seen it or appreciate it more. So I feel like it's gone past the underrated element. So I'm going to go for a movie called Almost Heroes, directed by Christopher Guest from the 90s. It's a Chris Farley, Matthew Perry comedy. I believe it's from 1998. And it is so funny. It's Chris Farley's last like starring role movie.
Uh-huh.
And
it's Christopher Guest, as in Christopher Guest, like Best in Show,
the Christopher
married
Guest.
to Jamie Lee Curtis, by the way. So that's another Carpenter tie-in.
Yep.
Okay.
It is, oh my God, it is so funny. And I feel like it has like under 10,000 logs on Letterboxd. So really, in the grand scheme of things, not a lot of people have actually seen it, it seems like.
What is this movie about?
So it takes place, them trying to discover, it's like an expedition.
Okay.
So
it's like not like Men in Tights. It's not like for some reason I'm thinking of like it's like in a time period, like an older time period. It's not modern day, right?
Yeah, it's like they're trying to. I believe they're trying to discover the Pacific Ocean. They're trying to get to the Pacific Ocean first.
Okay,
and a lot of shenanigans along the way. It is so funny. Oh my God.
Almost Heroes.
Almost Heroes. And it has, like Eugene Levy, who is always in Christopher Guest movies.
Christopher Guest.
So, and he's probably my favorite character in the movie. He's hilarious. He's actually kind of unrecognizable too. Like for the longest time, I didn't know it was him in the movie.
Okay. Yeah. I've never heard of this movie, although I feel like if I'm remembering like my Blockbuster days as a child, that I actually do remember this cover, but I've never seen this movie.
Highly recommend it. It is funny. It's a perfect blend of just stupid humor and Christopher Guest, his style.
Okay, good answer. Not a bad answer. That's acceptable. Number 2, what is your happiest movie experience?
There's been so many that this one was hard to answer because there's been so many over the years. I might have to go a recent one, which was, so Alamo Drafthouse had, or they do every year, a horror marathon. So like 4 to 5 movies. And that was my first time ever experiencing anything like that. So I guess the idea is you go to the theater and they don't tell you what movies they're going to screen beforehand. So it's like truly just a blind experience, and like the crowd energy, everyone's super into it. It usually sells out, I feel like, within a week. So everyone's excited to be there. A lot of the times they'll have special guests show up. So I'll have to go for recency bias. I'm going to have to say Dismember the Alamo, which is what the event is called.
And what were the movies that you watched?
So that one, I have the poster over here. Let me read it off here. So they did Session 9, Amityville Horror 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Prison, starring Viggo Mortensen.
Uh-huh.
And then they ended with Popcorn from the 90s. And their theme was haunted locations. So all those take place within, a creepy setting. Like Session 9 is an abandoned asylum.
But they're all back to back. You watched like 4 movies in a row or 5 movies in a row?
Yep.
Without leaving?
Yeah, they have like a 10-minute intermission between them to get your bearings.
So it's like an all-night thing?
Yeah, well, they started off usually around like 2 in the afternoon. So you're out of there by, 8, 9, something like that. But yeah, it's like a 6-hour long event.
And you're just like loving it. Like, because it's people like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bunch of horror nerds.
Bunch of horror nerds in Alamo Draft House in one place for several hours.
Yep.
With random movies that you don't know what they are.
Yep. That's also what makes it exciting to me. It's fun going into a movie not knowing what you're going to see.
Yeah, I can't even think of an example where I would do such a thing, because you would always know what you were going to see. So that in itself is just a unique experience, because you would always know when you're going to the theater what you're going to watch.
Yeah, even if you haven't watched a trailer, like who's starring it, who's the director, you kind of get a feel. Even the title, you're like, oh, I kind of get an idea of what this is going to be.
Very interesting. I like it. Okay. Alamo Draft House,
big shout out
this episode.
Yeah, big shout out.
Yeah. Okay, number 3, a movie you changed your opinion on.
I'm going to go to foreign films where I started getting into Russian cinema. And I watched this movie called Mermaid a few years ago. And it's like a take on The Little Mermaid, like the actual story, not the Disney version. It's a live action movie. And maybe it was because it was Russian culture at the time. I don't know. I didn't get it that much. And then it was recommended to me by someone, and I rewatched it the next year, and I got to know this person a lot more, and like Russian culture, and it like clicked for me. It clicked for me way more the second time, and oh my god, now I love that movie. Like, it's like a yearly watch. It's got this really zany energy, and just I'm trying to think of what movie to even compare it to as far as like an American film. But either way, it was a movie that first I didn't quite get it. Maybe it was just like a culture clash, and then you rewatch it and it's like, okay, this makes sense.
So did it become endearing to you because somebody who meant something to you was...
Yeah, it's one of those, but at that point too, like between when I watched it the first time and the second time, I had watched more like Russian cinema too in the meantime. So it's like you get kind of like a base, throughout. Just like anytime you try to go to, any type of foreign films, like say you want to start checking out foreign films from a certain country, or like they all have their own kind of feel, like you watch a South Korean movie, they all have this kind of similar feel. Same with Japanese movies, But yeah, it was my first kind of intro into Russian movies, but now I love it. And I would just recommend it. It's a solid movie. It's funny, it's dramatic. It's a little tragic.
Zany is the word you used, Ben. So got to watch out for that one. Okay, so Almost Heroes and Mermaid. I don't think you could get more different than those two things. That's quite a leap. Okay, the most important question. An actor you find undeniably sexy.
I went male and female on this one because I wanted to...
Oh, one of each?
Yeah. So, female, I have to go as Saoirse Ronan. I've always had the biggest crush on her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not only, she's just a great actor, too. She is fantastic.
Is there a performance that particularly, or like a movie particularly that you're thinking of? Because I just went to Atonement, and that's not what you're talking about.
No, I'm probably thinking Lady Bird is probably when I first started really respecting her, like as an actress. I was like, okay, this person's awesome. But also Grand Budapest Hotel she's great in that too.
Okay, well, who's the guy?
I'm going for Kurt Russell.
Of course.
Undeniable. Seriously, that guy, everything I've watched him in, I'm like, man, that guy is, you can admire both his craft and it's like, dude, this guy is just attractive.
Attractive.
I mean,
objectively.
Yeah, I don't know, like, do you agree? I don't know how.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was thinking when I was watching it last night, I was like, oh, because, Carpenter uses him a bunch of times, as you know, in Big Trouble in Little China and Escape from New York. So they were obviously friends. What I always come back to is Kirk Douglas, personally. But Kurt Russell has something about him that's kind of I don't really care vibe that's really attractive. But then once he's bothered by something, he'll kind of get in there.
Right.
And be invested. So there's something very sexy about that. Okay, so Kurt Russell and Saoirse Ronan. Very interesting, Ben. Very different picks.
Yes.
Okay, last question. If you were to die and come back as a movie character, who would you choose?
Initially, I kind of cheated with this, but I narrowed it down. Initially, I was just going to say James Bond in general.
Oh, wow. Without specifying the Bond.
Yeah, I'm a huge James Bond fan, but I'm going to go not necessarily based off of actor. I'm going to go based off of movie. So it is a Roger Moore movie. For Your Eyes Only is the specific James Bond version I would want to be in, because that movie, he's just traveling around to like Italy and these Greek islands, and the whole movie is super beautiful. And like, there's not too much in the movie where he's getting beat up or in terrible situations. Like, he still is because it's a Bond movie, but I feel like most of the movie he's just in these exotic, amazing locations. So
it's almost like a strange critique of the movie itself, where it's like, well, not much is going on. This is kind of like a vacay, he's Bond, but like kind of not, because he's not like hurting himself.
Yeah, it is more of a revenge type movie too for what he does in it. So I guess maybe that's why maybe that's why they went that approach. It's more realistic, I guess, compared to, because the movie before that was Moonraker, where he's literally in space and ridiculous, over the top space lasers.
I haven't seen any of the Roger Moore Bonds, so I actually have no frame of reference.
Oh man, they're all over the place, from grounded in reality, amazing movies, to just pure schlocky. There's one movie where he's in a jungle and he's on like a tree vine, or he's like on a vine and he's swinging, and they literally do a Tarzan yell. Might be one of the worst things in movie history, but it works.
Okay, so if you died and came back as somebody, you would come back as James Bond, but it would be the Roger Moore Bond and the one in For Your Eyes Only.
True.
That's it. So, Ben, it's been a pleasure.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
Nice.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Happy Halloween to everybody. Thank you all, and we will see you at the movie.